Okay, let's go ahead and start with a word of prayer, and then that'll kind of signal when the recording starts. So let's pray. Heavenly Father, Lord, I ask that you be with us today. Lord, just give us calmness of nerves when we are dealing with these types of issues, and just give us clarity, Lord. Help us to be there for our students. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Okay, so this is an ALICE training. There are multiple types of active shooting or active intruder types of trainings that you can get. I was trained in Baltimore for 2 days last spring with ALICE. The actual CEO of the company was there to train us, and his top trainer. It was really cool. We even did like live exercises with an automatic Nerf gun, and like I think you saw me on the news, didn't you? So they like even had us on the Baltimore news and everything. It was pretty fascinating, and it was pretty neat, like the information that they gave us. So this is just to help us in an event, God forbid that we ever have an event, where we would need to decide what to do as far as an active shooter or an intruder or lockdown or something like that. This is to help us learn how to deal with that. So ALICE is a type of training, and I wrote what it means up here on the board. It stands for alert, lockdown, inform, counter, and evacuate. So as we're looking at this first screen here, we have two different types of trainings, okay? We have some kids hiding underneath of a table. What do you guys think that they're probably doing a drill for? Maybe a tornado. That's probably correct. They're probably doing a drill for a tornado. How about the kids on the right? They're just sitting at the bottom of the whiteboard looking up at the at a video or something. Maybe same thing, right? Maybe tornado, something like that. Maybe hurricane. They do hurricane drills now. Hey, Mr. Greg. So they might be doing something like that. It's actually interesting that these kids on the right are, we got somebody else. These kids on the right, that's actually Virginia Tech during the shooting. Those kids are actually, their professor is still teaching them while a shooting is going on in their adjacent building. So they didn't do anything. They just sat there. So kind of an interesting thing. And ALICE kind of pinpoints where we have some weak areas in our security and where we need to pick up the volume a little bit. Okay, hopefully this will, there we go. All right. So some myths and fallacies here. Just talking about, this is what ALICE is. They have now become a training institute, and they solely train people on this type of evacuation or countering or locking down. And it's not just for schools. It's for all types of business institutions. They base ALICE on scientific evidence, on historical evidence, and then experience. So this is something that has been researched. How it started is Officer Aubrey Hawkins was killed. It kind of led to a discussion on school safety protocols. The guy that started ALICE, actually, he didn't have the A at first. He just had lice. And his wife was a school teacher, and she was like, you can't introduce lice to schools. And so he added the A, so it would be ALICE and not lice. So this kind of gives you, and I won't play the video, but it kind of gives you a progression of how these active-based trainings have progressed through the years. So, you know, really, if you look at how everything has started, really our first major one that we could probably think of is Columbine, right? There was like no really proactivity during Columbine, and thus you had a lot of kids killed. So the FBI and different researchers have found, hey, something isn't right here. Why do we still have so many people killed during these? How can we lessen that number? Because it's not if these things happen, it's really when these things are going to happen in our facility. So, Alice's current footprint, and they're just kind of showing everybody that this is a really good program. It's based in a lot of places. So they're in over 4,200 schools, 4,100 law enforcement agencies. The class I went to, there were tons of cops. It was not only just for educators, but there were like tons of cops. They have to learn it as well, because they have to know how the schools respond and how businesses respond. Hospitals, businesses, houses of worship. Some churches have decided to implement this because there have been church shootings, unfortunately. Universities and governments. It won't happen here. And basically, the question is, hey, the question is, or the statement, it won't happen here. We need to think of that as a fallacy. It could very easily happen here. Now, CCA has done a really, really good job, especially this summer, of bulking up our security. We've instituted a whole new camera system, a whole new audio system throughout the entire building. We have some window films that we've put on. Doesn't make our building bulletproof, but it makes it the glass smash proof. So somebody couldn't come up and smash our windows and get inside within 3 seconds, which is what happened at Sandy Hook when you had all those little kids killed. He smashed the glass and was inside the building within a couple of seconds. And so we've taken precautions for that. Now, here's the different places that it's happened. It's happened in businesses, in K through 12 schools, in churches, in universities, in the government. It's even happened at hospitals. Another fallacy here is it takes a long time to hurt a lot of people. The thing that they've found in this researching is that it doesn't. These events happen extremely fast. And usually the weapons that are being used are obviously not legal weapons. They're using weapons that they obtain in some form or fashion, and so they can shoot a lot of rounds very quickly and really hurt a lot of people. So fact 1, there's a shot fired every 4 to 15 seconds. Fact 2, 50% hit someone. All right, so Columbine High School. We're just going to kind of go through these so I can show you that it doesn't take necessarily a really long time. In Columbine High School, it lasted 49 minutes. This is the first one, right? So the law enforcement agencies have no idea how to react. I actually remember watching this on TV. I was homesick one day from school. And this was, I think it was like my sophomore year or my junior year or something like that. But the law enforcement agents waited outside of the building the whole time. And I don't know if you guys remember seeing the scenes where all the kids came out and they all had to run out with their hands up, remember, in lines. Obviously, they don't do that anymore, but it lasted 49 minutes. This is one of the longer ones. 13 were killed. Virginia Tech, okay? 13 were killed in Columbine, 49 minutes long. Virginia Tech was 11 minutes. 32 were killed and 25 were injured. You'll see it just takes literally, 5 minutes in Sandy Hook. 26 killed, and we're talking about little kids like kindergarten, first, second graders. Obviously, they can't fight back, right? They're little kids. Chardon High School, this was under a minute. And the reason it was under a minute is because of the coach you see up there on the Sports Illustrated. He actually took down the shooter and probably saved a lot of lives. Gabby Gifford, under 2 minutes, 6 were killed, 13 injured. Century 16, this is an office building, under 5 minutes, 12. Hartford Beer Distributor, under 7 minutes, 8 were killed. Fort Hood, okay, you would think a very safe place. 10 minutes, 13 killed, 31 injured. Under 6 minutes at the Charleston Emmanuel AME Church. You guys probably remember that one. 9 killed. Under 5 minutes at the Wedgwood Baptist Church. 7 killed. Another one. So basically, it's just showing it does not take a long time to kill a lot of people. And like I said, these shooters are able to get a massive amount of shots out. So we're trying to figure out, okay, how can we really fight that? Like, obviously, a lot of times we might not be able to obtain their gun. In Maryland, it's extremely hard to get your concealed carry. You almost even can't unless you're a business owner. So arming your teachers is not necessarily really an option. So what do we do? What are some things we can do? We can actually learn a lot from some of these situations. This up here is a picture of the hallway at Virginia Tech. Okay, so this is, does everybody remember the Virginia Tech shooting? It was a pretty big one because what happened was the guy was able to, it happened on a second floor, and he was able to bar both stairwells, and the SWAT team couldn't get in on either side. So he walked down this hallway, and I'll kind of give you the way that the events worked, but the first room he went into was 206. Okay, this was the very first room that he went into. It was advanced hydrology. I don't even know what that is, but as he starts shooting, everybody gets down onto the floor. Okay, he kills the instructor as soon as he walks in, begins to shoot students who they hid under their desks or went to the back corner of the room. All right, so it'd be like somebody walking in here, starting to shoot, everybody just hiding under their desk or running to the back corner. All right, he leaves that room. He goes across the hall to room 207. Now, room 207 should have already been alerted to something. How? Because of the sound, right? Now, sometimes gunfire is confusing, even when you're indoors. It sounds very echoey, you're not sure, but better safe than sorry, but they were not ready. This was elementary German. He goes into the second room, he kills the instructor, and then begins to shoot the students who are initially seated in desks, so they're still seated. The students then try to hide while he shoots them on the floor. Okay, he leaves that room. He goes to room 205. So this room right here. Okay, this is scientific computing. The students agree that they are hearing gunfire. They barricade the door with a table and chairs and sat against it since the doors opened inward and did not lock. The gunman cannot enter and shoot the doorknob and shoots the doorknob with 3 rounds that went over the students' heads. He still cannot enter, so he leaves, and he doesn't ever come back to this room. Okay? So there were 12 altogether in this room. 12 survived in that room. All right, we're still not done with these 2 rooms because he's going to come back. Room 211. He goes down the hall here to room 211. Gunman enters classroom after pushing table out of the way. Okay, so they had put a table in the way. Unfortunately, the table wasn't heavy enough. Okay, it was easily moved. He kills the instructor. No one was holding the table. Matthew Laporte charges the gunman and is shot 6 times before going down. The remaining victims hid under desks and the back corner of the room. The gunman walks around the room, just shooting the people on the floor. That's all they were doing, was just laying on the floor. He goes out. He goes back to room 207. Students, some of them wounded, get up and barricade the door using their hands and feet. Gunman comes back to the room, pushes the door, and cannot enter. He shoots the doorknob, does not hit anyone, and pushes a second time. He can't open the door, so he leaves and he doesn't come back to room 207. Okay? Because they barricaded after the first entry. After he came in the first time, they barricaded the door. Room 211 goes back to room 211. The gunman re-enters room 211 a second time and shoots people laying on the ground. They're still just laying on the ground, a lot of them. Actually, I think one of the girls ended up playing dead. She was one of the survivors in one of those rooms. She acted like she was dead, but he shot her multiple times. He ended up shooting her in the rear, and she had to act like she was just not alive. He goes back to room 204. Okay? Professor Lebruscu holds the door shut using his body, and is yelling at students to jump out the window. Okay, so this is a professor. He actually talked about this guy in our training exercise, and I believe this is the same guy that he was a survivor of the Holocaust. And so I don't know why, but he was the one that barricaded the door so the kids could get out. 14 students jump out the window of the second floor, and all of the 14 survive. Labrusco is wounded when the gunman shoots through the door. The gunman then enters the room. He executes the professor. He then shoots the remaining students. He ends up killing one. But do you see how many kids were in that room? There were like 19 kids in that room. 14 of them survived it because the professor was being proactive. He was saying, get out, get out, get out. No matter how you get out, just get out. He goes back to room 206. The gunman re-enters the room a second time. He continues shooting people that are laying on the floor. Room 211. The gunman enters the room a third time, shooting people on the floor. Investigators believe Laporte is the last one shot in the back of the head and is the last victim before the gunman commits suicide. So he hears the blast. The FBI the SWAT team have to blast the door to get it open. He hears that. He ends up committing suicide. Okay, all of this is said to say the people that survived Virginia Tech are the ones who were proactive. Obviously, they were not the ones that were laying on the floor. We as educators and volunteers, as substitutes, as coaches, have to be proactive. These gunmen are not here to take hostages. Research has shown that. They don't take hostages. They are literally looking for the maximum number of kills. Unfortunately, that's what they're looking for. So we have to learn from these situations, and we have to figure out how can we get our students to safety. What are the ways that we can do that? We need some tools to be able to do that. Alice gives us 3 good ways to do that. Okay? We'll keep going here. So it's a proactive approach. Alice is not saying for every single situation, lock your door, put things in front of it, and then that's it. Sit and wait. No, it's a proactive approach. We have to be proactive. It provides additional options, okay, beyond just a traditional lockdown. In the old days, that's what they told us to do. Everything was a lockdown, right? That's what you practiced, is just a lockdown. We can't just do that because every event is not going to be the same. What's happening right out here outside of my door is not the same thing that's happening outside of, Mr. Baugher's door down the hallway or in the other part of the building or upstairs in the church building. It's not the same thing. We have to react different ways. Alice is not sequential. I wrote it up here on the board. It doesn't go in order. You don't have to just say, oh, okay, I have to alert first, then I have to lock down. No, it doesn't go like that. It increases the odds of survival, and it is research-based. This guy has done tons of research on it. I was amazed and blown away by the numbers that he was able to give us. All right, so we'll just jump right in. Alice, the A is alert. Your initial awareness. What is giving you that first alert? So you're in your classroom. Esther, you're in the piano room teaching piano. Mrs. Cook, has her library students. Maybe some of you guys are subbing. You have a first initial alert. It probably is going to be different for everybody all over campus, okay? Your alert could be the sound of gunfire. And you could say, what is that? What is that sound? And you might have to figure out what that sound is. It could be an alarm going off. It could be somebody coming over the loudspeaker here and saying, initiate Alice, we have an intruder. You don't know what that first initial alert is. So you need to be ready. What is that alert? Could be screaming. That's one of the things they said on here. Now, something that CCA has implemented is the use of plain language in an emergency situation. It used to be that we would have codes. I think our code was, attention CCA staff, Mr. Jones has an insurance meeting in the cafeteria after school. And I remember we tried that one time and we were all like, is this a lockdown drill? Like nobody even knew. Like we didn't even know because we couldn't remember. And like, can you imagine hearing gunfire and like having to remember that phrase? You're not going to remember it. So we have initiated, we use plain language. There's no code red, there's no code blue, there's no code black. We literally have little things taped above each phone, and you pick up the phone. Ours is 777. You pick up the phone, dial 777. We want you to use as plain of English as you can. There is an intruder outside of Miss Beth's door. So if there was somebody out here shooting, I would tell them, because the elementary would need to know, don't go out your building. You need to lock down in your building right now. So I pick up my phone, dial 777. I'm going to be, and it even tells me right here, be direct and to the point. You need to just use plain English. Nothing that has to do where people are going to have to think, what does that mean? Or if we have a visitor, they're not having to think, I wonder what that could mean. We have to use plain English. There's a video here, and it's of a hospital. I can't play it because I'm hooked up to this mic and you wouldn't be able to hear the sound, but they're in an emergency room, and the woman sitting at the desk has someone come up to the emergency room window with a gun. And literally it takes them, I think it's just like, I don't know, it's over 60 seconds before they even do an alert over the sound system, okay? And this is in an emergency room hospital. And when they do the alert, you can hear it over the intercom. It says, code silver in the emergency room. Code silver in the emergency room. Do you think anybody knew what code silver meant? What does it sound like? What does code silver sound like? Yeah, sounds like somebody lost an old person. Go find the old person that has escaped, okay? Nobody knows what that means. So if they actually had a literal situation. There was a man in the waiting room with a gun. People wouldn't know to not go back in the waiting room. You have to use plain English. And hospitals, honestly, a lot of hospitals still use those codes. Even the nurses, they'll have them on their name badge. They'll have them on the back. So like they don't even remember. They have to get their name badge out and figure out, and if it's not an emergency, I can understand that. If it's, cardiac arrest or whatever like that, where just they need to know it. But obviously, if you have an intruder, everybody needs to know. So we have to use plain English. That's just showing the other side of that. All right, so we'll move on to L. This would be one of your options. L, lockdown. Traditional lockdown procedure plus these things that are here. So if for some reason we needed to go into lockdown, if there was an intruder right outside of my door, yes, we don't have any other options, do we? We can't evacuate because they'd easily be able to shoot us. So we're going to lock down. Hey, awesome thing about CCA, all of our doors lock automatically. One of the problems that they had at Sandy Hook is you had to manually stick a key in the outside of the door and lock it. And one of the rooms had a substitute that day, and they forgot to give the substitute the keys. So there wasn't even a way to lock the door. All of our doors lock automatically as soon as you close them. Yes, some of them have windows in them, but again, we have the window film. Mine don't. We're a little dark in here, but we do have peepholes, so we're able to see who's outside. But they automatically lock. So when you do, if I did have an intruder outside of this door, yes, I would lock my students down. Since I have high school students, I'm going to say, guys, let's barricade the doors. We're going to flip this desk over. We're going to put it against that. We're going to go get those filing cabinets and drag them in front of that door. I'm going to probably rip my cord out of the ceiling here, wrap it around my desk and the doorknob so that even if they were able to get the door open, the desk would stop them. So I'm going to use multiple things in my classroom. Now, I know elementary is quite a bit different, okay, those of you that substitute for elementary. And it would be a little bit harder. But elementary kids can still lift their chairs to put in front of the door. They can still push their desks. You'd be surprised how many, you could get a lot of those little kids behind the teacher's desk to be able to push it. There's options that you can do. So elementary is a lot different than high school. High school is able to help quite a bit more. But as a teacher of elementary, you just have to work with what you've got and increase the time. That's what you're looking for, is you're looking for time in between the start of the event and when law enforcement arrive. Law enforcement has learned They do not wait outside the building. Their one and only objective is to kill the shooter. They will step over bleeding kids, hurt kids, whatever they have to do, and they will find the shooter and take them down. That's their one and only objective. So our goal is to get as much time as we can in between the shooter and law enforcement, okay? So there's many different things that it says here. Spread out within the room with counter devices. What is a counter device? Anything you can throw, literally anything. In a lot of our drills that we do here, the kids are told to grab their books when we go into a lockdown. So they'll have their science books or their math books. Here in my classroom, I keep a couple pet rocks over there. That's Juan and Juanita. Okay, and then we have like just other things. I have books. I teach high schoolers, so they could even pick up desks. We are preparing ourselves for if the intruder gets into our room. Okay, the idea of that, and we're going to talk about that in a few minutes. Encounter is to interrupt their thinking process and how they will be able to react. You don't want the kids to huddle. Okay, so when you get into a lockdown, don't have them all cower in one certain area of the room. You want them spread out. You want to look for alternate escape routes. I don't have any alternate escape routes in this room. If I desperately needed to, I might be able to knock out a couple ceiling tiles and try and get some kids, in the next room over or somehow, but I really don't have any options. Elementary, they have windows in all of their rooms except the library, I think. Or maybe not the art room either. Yeah. So you'd have to really barricade is what you're doing. But they even teach, for those of you that substitute over there, use the second story window as an escape route. You can hang a little kid out of the window and drop them. I would so much rather you did that with my kids than leaving them in that room. I don't care if they break a leg or break an arm. Drop them out that window and just keep going, every kid right after the other. Do the best that you can. Don't open the door for anyone. This is a hard one, especially for educators, those that teach little kids. It is so hard to think about not opening that door, and you're not supposed to. Now, are you probably going to? Yeah, probably. I can't imagine leaving, a little kid out in the hallway yelling to get into my classroom, especially elementary. High school is a little bit of a different story because there have been incidents where it was the high schooler that was doing the shooting. So you have to be very careful. We've been trained, especially as high school teachers, to not let anybody, not open the door for anyone, even if it's somebody that went on bathroom break. Dial 911 as soon as you can. You'd be surprised, but that's one of the first things that you forget to do. Get your cell phone, get to the phone, even if it's 20 people calling, call 911. As soon as you can get that law enforcement, literally, I was talking with Scott, they can get here like in under 2 minutes. Like literally, Chestertown PD is right here. So we got to call them right away. We are supplied with first aid kits in every single room. And then we also, each classroom should be supplied with a Coca-Cola for the one diabetic student we have. So we have a diabetic student that could go into some type of shock. So we prep all the classrooms with that. So those are the things that we would need. What type of door do you have? You would need to check that out. All of the doors over here open out. So it's going to be a little bit easier, isn't it? For somebody, it's almost like we can't stand against it to hold it shut. So we need to figure out, okay, how are we going to barricade? What are we going to do? It just kind of shows you some of the different things. Here's number 2 right here is Sandy Hook. See the shot that he put to the glass right there? This is the open glass. He shot right through it and stepped right through. So how do we defend against that? We are literally going to do the best we can. Like I said, flip the desks up, pile desks in front of. Is it the best thing you can do? Maybe not, but it might be the only thing we can do, especially if you have elementary kids. Do what you can do. Barricading is a really good option if you can. any type of cords or straps. I have all kinds of computer cords hanging here. Any type of straps that you would have in your room that you could put against the door so they wouldn't be able to pull it open. Some doors are a little bit different. This was something that the CEO, his wife was a teacher, but she taught special education, and most of her students were not mobile. She had kids all that were in wheelchairs. So, of course, evacuating is not an option. So he specially built these cabinets on rolling wheels, these really heavy cabinets, and the wheels locked. So once she got them in place, she could lock the wheels and protect her students because she couldn't get them out. There was no way to. So this is an actual student barricade here at Kent State University. Okay, they got a call that, or an alert that there was a shooter on the premises. Okay, they didn't know the location of the shooter, so they decided to go ahead and lock down. And during a shooting at Kent State University, the instructor had told the students to use traditional lockdown, which would just basically mean stay in your room, keep the door shut, okay? These students had just actually taken ALICE, and so they were like, no, let's barricade. So they went ahead and put this kind of really complex barricade. You can kind of see there's a rope going here and here and here, and they have some straps here, and they have like a table, it looks like here. Actually, maybe 2 tables here. So they kind of were just really creative with it, and that's what you have to do, is just be creative with it. The next thing is inform. So with inform, you're passing on real-time information. It's basically a continuation of an alert. Get on the phone and tell as much information as you can. What's happening? Because when the cops come in, they need to know which building. You know, we're Chestertown Christian Academy. Which building are you in? What hallway are you in? Do you know if it's a student? Do you know if it's an adult? Like, what information do you know? Obviously, PA system would be very valuable. Phones, make sure that as a volunteer or a substitute, you always have your phone on you at all times. Try not to ever put it down. Try not to ever be without it, because you don't really have too many other forms of communication without that. Especially like Mr. Greg, you're outside with the boys. You'd have to be able to communicate somehow. So try and always have your phone on you. We do have a really awesome camera system now, which is great. The offices can look at any part of the building and outdoors. I can as well on my cell phone. I can pull it up, even if I'm at home. I can look and see what's going on or what's happening. So that's really nice. Now, we don't have somebody that sits and watches 24/7, but we do have a recorder. So, all right. The next thing is the C, counter. Okay, countering is not fighting. All right, we're not telling you to get in there and just, take down this person with a gun and just fight them. Because a lot of you teach elementary or substitute for elementary. You're not going to really be able to do that. Fighting is not really the idea we have in mind. What it is when you say counter is you're taking back control of the situation. This is going to be age appropriate, okay? Because obviously my high schoolers can do a whole lot more than the kindergarten can do, right? This is going to be used as a last resort. Like the only way, if there's a shooter outside that door right now, we're going to counter only if he gets in. That's our last resort. That's it. That's all we've got left. And we would counter. And it's also a personal choice. Listen, you're going to have, even in my high school, I'm going to have kids that are literally, if there was a real event, they're going to freak out and completely shut down. They're not going to be able to do anything. And little kids, same thing. Now, kids are resilient. They will rise to the occasion if you as the adult are rising to the occasion. If you're freaking out and panicking, you're going to scare them to death. So the more resolved we can be and ready, then the better. The better the students are going to handle the situation. So, let's see if it will, okay. So, the idea of counter, okay? It's basically to interrupt the process of shooting accurately. So how many of you in here have ever shot a gun? Several of you. Okay. So there's a whole process to it, right? You're standing correctly. You are looking at your target. You know, I don't know if anybody in here can shoot a bullseye with their eyes closed. Probably not. I can't even do it with my eyes open, but some people might be able to. But you have to, there's a certain alignment that you have. You know, when cops are being trained, they have to stand a certain way. The sight alignment, they're taught their trigger control. There's a certain stance, a certain grip. They're even taught a certain breathing method to help, you know, because you don't want to be huffing and puffing and the gun moving. So there's a certain process to shooting correctly to make it more accurate. All right. And our idea of countering is to interrupt that process. Okay. So the counter strategies, obviously, when you have a police officer, they're at a very high skill level. They have to have so many hours of shooting on a range and, you know, so many things like that. When you're talking about a shooter at a school or somewhere, they're a very low skill level. A lot of them have been shooting really just on video games. You know, that's really what a lot of it is. So it's just crazy that it's showing how the hit rate for a police officer is under 30% in a stressful situation. But these shooters are having a hit rate of over 50%. Why do you think that is? What do you think the difference is? Because these police officers have been trained like crazy. When they're going out on the street, okay, and they're having to actually shoot and kill someone, do you think that these guys are hiding underneath their desks and sitting still? No. A lot of them are shooting back, aren't they? So the police officer is literally a lot of times having to duck, having to get behind a car, having to move around, maybe even crawl on the ground. The shooters, their targets are literally laying down on the ground. So their hit rate is so high because nobody's moving. There's nothing happening to them. So we have to think, okay, how can we reverse that? What are things we can do? Obviously, not all of our kids have guns. We don't have guns. We can't shoot back at them. So what are we going to do? It's the phrase that they want us to learn is called the OODA loop. Has anybody ever heard of the OODA loop? A couple of you. The OODA loop is basically your way of how you think. And you have a certain process that you go through, okay? And it shows you here the OODA phrase, okay? You have observe, all right? So this is all the things that are actually happening to you right now, but they're happening pretty quick. So you have observe, you have a target acquisition, okay? Meaning that I walk into a room, if I have a gun, I'm looking at who I'm going to shoot, right? Or what I'm going to shoot. So that's my target acquisition. Well, how can we interrupt that? By noise, by movement, by distance, okay? The next O would be orient. So I'm having to control my breathing, my stance, my grip. You can interrupt that by being put off balance. The D is decide. Then I have to decide, okay? Is my sight still on the target that I want? And you can obviously interrupt that by distractions. Next, you have to act. That's squeezing the trigger. That's all those things, and interrupted by put on the defensive. So the idea is to interrupt that process. Those things are happening very rapidly. They're even happening for you as you're looking at me. You're going through the observing phase, the orient phase, the deciding phase, and the acting phase, okay? If I had a ball, I did have a ball and JoJo stole it from me, but I normally have a ball at this point, and I throw it, and a few of you are going to react, right? If it's close enough to you, you're going to react. It's going to interrupt whatever you're doing. You're going to have to look away from me and look at the ball. And that's the idea of interrupting the OODA loop phase. I'm going to play this video for you, and I'm just going to show, you're not going to be able to hear the sound, I don't think. But this is a video of Ronald Reagan when he was attempted to be assassinated on a street. Okay, this is him walking out of a building right now.
It doesn't make much sense, Henry. He puts you here and then he runs around where he comes.
And you won't be able to hear it, but a gunshot is getting ready to go off. You'll know when. So, a man that was standing on the side of the building right there, he shot at Ronald Reagan. Almost, really almost killed him. I can't remember, was he actually shot? He was. Okay. So he was actually shot, but the person that tackled him was not a police officer. The original person that tackled him was a criminal that was literally standing there, and he heard the shot, and he just immediately reacted. Like there was no pause or wait. But it just kind of shows that you can take back control immediately, and it doesn't have to be a certain, type of person. All right. So we're going to do just a dot exercise real quick so you guys can see how your OODA loop can be interrupted. Okay, so that's what I'm going to try and do is see if you guys can do this here. All right. So in this first slide, they want you to see how many times does the blue dot appear on the screen. Okay? Here we go. Come on. Hopefully we're not frozen here. There we go. Anybody get anything? 11. Very good. 11. Okay. So that wasn't too hard, right? You had one thing to concentrate on. All right. So in the next slide, I want you to see how many times does the blue dot appear on the screen and how many times does the yellow dot appear on the screen. Okay, so count the blues, count the yellows. Okay? All right, here we go. Anybody? 12 and 10. That's actually really close. Yeah. I think the answer is 11 and 11. 11 and 11. Yes. 11 and 11. Okay. So did you see how when you were trying to do two different things, it was literally almost impossible. You really couldn't, because you really had to keep track of, okay, so I can count the blue dots, but then keep track of the counting and then count the yellow and keep track of them and go back to the blue and pick up where you left off. And it was just too much. Okay. This next slide, does anybody want to try? You have to follow the dots with a marker. Somebody want to try? See if they can do it. Mr. Greg?
What, marking right on the board? Is that what we're doing?
No, you're just pointing. You can just grab a marker and just point to it.
Okay.
Okay, so you're going to follow the blue.
Your board then, right?
Yes. You're going to follow the blue dot on the screen, okay, with the marker. All right? Here we go. Okay, you stop, see? So normally this makes a really loud screaming noise, but it actually, he actually stopped as it was anyway. Did you notice when she came up on the screen, it kind of threw him off and he was kind of like, but imagine a screaming noise being thrown into that. It's going to throw you off immediately. You're not going to be able to keep doing what you're doing. I know we as women like to say that we can multitask very well, which I always brag that I'm a good multitasker, but apparently you can't multitask. There's no way for you to really be able to concentrate completely on two things at once. And so that's the idea of interrupting the OODA loop process. That's what we want to do. If somebody enters your room, you have no other choice. You want to interrupt the OODA loop process. With little kids, you can do that by screaming as loud as you can. You can do that by throwing anything. Even something simple on my desk. I have a lot of essential oils up here. I mean, if I threw this at somebody, your automatic reaction is to put your hands up or to try and catch it. It's just what we're programmed to do. Our brains cannot function like that. Think of a high intensity situation where somebody's going to get hurt. If you're throwing something, this person who's shooting, their automatic reaction is to move. They're going to waver in their sight, in their stance, in their breathing. That's the whole idea of counter. And that's kind of what I want to emphasize. We use what we can, what we have around us. Somebody had suggested putting buckets of rocks in every room. And some schools actually are doing that. Some schools have already had problems with that. You can imagine, okay? One of the guys at one of our faculty trainings told us, keep soda cans in your room. That would be great, okay? They might not always stay there because kids are going to drink them. You know it's going to happen. But use what you have. The books we use over here are pretty heavy. A lot of them could pack a pretty hard punch. I probably have 3 or 4 kids that carry around cups like this. They're very heavy, okay? Use what you have around you. The idea is if somebody came in that room, we would throw and scream and distract as much as we could. We as adults could probably swarm and take them down, okay? We're adults. Elementary kids are not going to be able to do that. Your idea is to throw, distract, tell your kids to get out. Get out of the building, run, okay? You don't want your kids staying in that room. It's not going to be good. So that's the idea. Mr. Gregg out on the soccer field, the idea would be the boys to run. Yep. Get off campus. Run as far away as they possibly can. We'd rather have to look for kids for 5 hours than to pick up dead bodies off of the field. And that's just the way that it is. In the gym, Coach Fate has the girls in the gym. Obviously, there's multiple exits. Use that back door. Get out. That's the idea, is for your kids to be able to get out. Now, if we were in a situation in this building, if there was an intruder in this building, elementary, I actually talked to the CEO of Alice himself, and he said the safest thing for the other building would be for them to lock down, okay? Because all the doors lock and everything, and law enforcement would be able to get there. Now, for some reason, law enforcement couldn't get there, and you got some new information, hey, the shooter is now in your building, that's when you have to change your idea of thinking. But as far as if the shooter's in the other building, okay? All right, the last thing in Alice is evacuate. That's obviously the preferred response. If you can get out of the building, get out of the building, okay, unless otherwise specified. Occupants must have the authority to leave the building. Leave all belongings behind. Don't tell your kids to grab their stuff. Leave it. We don't care about it. Don't get into any vehicles. This removes as many potential targets, removes needs for the parents to come to the scene, and then we evacuate to a rally point. Some of the teachers have specific rally points. Our evacuation zones for our school is the rehab center right down here, and they've already been notified we're their evacuation point too. So they already know, and most of the kids know that. It's something we constantly have to remind them of and that kind of thing, but kindergarten, Mrs. Brinley has even shown them how to crawl out the window on the first floor. She's shown them the tree where they need to run to. It's just things that we have to think about, but evacuation is the best option. If I can get out, I'm going to get out and get my kids out. I have outside this door, I have a really long hallway that way, but I have a staircase right here, a little back staircase that I could get my kids to in 1 second. So I have to constantly think of things like that if I would need to. All right. An event resolution, this is just to inform you guys that, over 80% did not end until an aggressive act occurred, meaning that the shooter just kept shooting until some kind of force was applied. So applied force by a citizen or police officer, that's 43%. Suicide or attempted suicide, 40%. No applied force, 16%, and then the attacker fled. That's under 1%. I think that was the last shooting, the Florida shooting. The guy I think he ran and he tried to blend in with the students or something, and they pointed him out. But we need some kind of force for this to end. There's some resources if you want to read up anything more. Alice has some resources on Alice. I think it's ALICEInstitute.com. And you just simply would go to that site and look up some things. This training was not meant to scare anybody by any means. The kids will be getting this training in the next couple weeks. The high school will get this training. The elementary, Alice actually has a very nice little book that I will read to them about not being scared but being prepared. So we'll have a little bit of some training with the elementary and the high school. Unfortunately, these are the times that we live in, and we have to be prepared. We've really done as much as we can as a school to be prepared. And actually, when I went to the training, listening to some of these people's schools, we were way ahead of a lot of them on their security. The one school in inner city Baltimore, they have drive-bys like every week. The kids actually would have to hide underneath the windows and like craziness. So we live obviously in a very safe county. God forbid that anything like this would ever happen, but I want the kids to be prepared. We'll go through this training every year so that we can be ready if an event were to happen. Now, just the recap on Alice. So your 3 things here, okay? Alert and inform is just the way we're communicating. That's all that it is. But your 3 options that you have if a situation were to occur, okay? You can either lock down, you can either counter, or you can evacuate. Those are your 3 options. You, as a teacher, volunteer, coach, have to decide, what are we going to do? What is our best option? Okay, and you need to figure that out. So we will be having drills. I can't guarantee that any of you will be here because all of you are substitutes or only on special days. I will tell you that we will never have a drill without announcing that it is a drill. Okay, so for some reason you're here and you hear something, but you don't hear that this is a drill, then somebody out there, then you need to assume that it's real life. Okay, I'll always announce at the end of my drills, this is a drill, and I'll say it like 3 times. This is only a drill. This is only a drill. So make sure that you recognize that. I will never not have a drill without announcing it. Okay. All right. Are there any questions about anything?